This screencast is just a brief introduction to the concepts of MOOCs, flipped classrooms, and digital badges. I'm first going to talk just a little bit about MOOCs, just to give you an overview of what they're about and where you might find some of them. So first of all, what is a MOOC? Well, a MOOC is a massive open online course, and essentially there are a number of characteristics of MOOCs. Now sometimes we refer to the concept of MOOCs, but actually we might be referring to a MOOC platform, which is where we might go and view a MOOC. So what is a MOOC? Well, it's a course that's available online and it's free to participate. You don't usually need any prior qualifications to participate, and usually it only involves you, for example, submitting your email address and signing up for a MOOC that might start at some point in the future. Even if a MOOC has already run, it's quite often possible for you to review the MOOC materials that were available previously. The potential of MOOCs, one of the potentials of MOOCs is that there's an unlimited number of students who can participate. And this, of course, has some pitfalls associated with it, because if you have thousands of people enrolled in a MOOC, then it's not going to be possible for the person delivering the MOOC to give, one-to-one feedback and so on. So there are some constraints there. Typically, MOOCs are run for a short period of time. Some sources say 8 to 10 weeks. I've done MOOCs that have been 4 to 6 weeks as well, but usually you're talking about shorter than a normal semester course or module. Usually the method of delivery, there's kind of a rough schedule which is usually released to you at the start. So they tell you in week 1 we'll cover this topic, in week 2 and so on. And they might outline a couple of activities that will be required each week, but you're not actually obliged to undertake those activities. Sometimes there is some possible qualification or certification associated with it, but usually it's up to the individual to decide if they want to participate in the MOOC or not. Because of the large numbers that often register to do a MOOC, even though they don't always complete it, the interaction is generally fairly informal, and it's usually one way from the instructor, but then maybe they encourage then the individual students to engage with one another, but there doesn't tend to be as much instructor to individual student. There doesn't tend to be that much interaction in that regard. Obviously, with the technology that's available nowadays, MOOC courses can take advantage of using slides and videos and podcasts and so on. So usually MOOCs use a variety of different media, also, linking to library databases and ebooks and the like. As I said, there's no requirement to complete a MOOC, and that's often why MOOCs get bad press in terms of the high dropout rate. But there have been moves, even in the last couple of years, to find ways of accrediting people's participation. So if somebody does complete a MOOC, or if somebody does engage in all the activities in the MOOC, then they usually want to get some kind of recognition for that. So kind of the simplest form of recognition is that you might get a certificate of participation that you can download. You may have to pay a small fee for it. The MOOC may be offered by a prestigious university, but it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't mean you have a formal qualification from that institution. It just means you've engaged with the MOOC. Then there are kind of subtle variations of that as well. It may be that if you complete all the activities and you submit them by a certain time, you might get a certificate of completion, which is a bit more than a participation certificate. You may even be invited to undertake a course at a later time by that institution. They might give you a reduction in the course fee because you've shown the dedication that's required. And then you've also got then the kind of concept of digital badges and open badges, which is, I'll talk about shortly, but it's essentially an electronic way of recognizing people's engagement in MOOCs and other online learning. So just to look there, there's many platforms that offer MOOCs. Some of the most common, frequently known ones include Coursera, edX, FutureLearn, and so on. Some of these platforms enable anybody to upload a MOOC course. Other platforms require you to actually maybe be a prestigious university, so you might have to be high up in the rankings to be able to upload your MOOC to that platform. Then there are some variations of MOOCs, and you'll see a bit of a discussion of that on the MOOCs.com website. Small private online courses, synchronous massive online courses, and lots of variations whereby initially you might offer a MOOC to a potentially unlimited audience. Then based on the people who actually complete it, you might offer them a package that's maybe a little bit more attractive. There might be a little bit of a qualification associated with it. Or as I said a while ago, it could be that you get invited to do a module or a course in that institution, maybe at a reduced fee, or you might get some exemptions because you've completed the MOOC and so on. So obviously all the institutions that are involved in these kinds of these types of delivery, they're looking for ways to turn it into, a revenue stream. Which leads me then to the next slide here. This is just a graphic from elearninginfographics.com, just to highlight, for example, some of the bigger, more well-known MOOCs there in the centre. And you can see how venture capitalists, universities and non-profit organisations are actually putting money, in some cases, into multiple MOOC platforms. And there are obviously some commercial interests here as well. So apart from the universities that have an obvious role to play in delivering online courses, if you look at the companies, for example, you'll see Pearson and Google being involved. And even though this graphic might be, a year or two old, it just gives you a feel for the types of people and organisations who might be involved and behind these initiatives, and how they would have different reasons for getting involved. Obviously, for a university, it's the potential to target more students. It's for prestigious reasons and so on. Companies like book publishers and so on can obviously maybe require their textbooks to be on those MOOC courses. And then obviously there's, revenue that can be generated from these, particularly if they turn into maybe smaller private online courses that might have a slightly more limited number who can do the course, but they might have various criteria for selecting who does that online course. Okay. The next concept I just want to briefly introduce is the concept of the flipped classroom. And sometimes people use the terms flipped classroom and flipped learning interchangeably, but technically speaking, just because you have flipped your classroom activities does not automatically mean that you have a flipped learning environment. So just in terms of what we mean by the flipped classroom, it's actually a relatively simple concept. Essentially, what happens in class happens beforehand, and what happens in the evening time after you've been to a class now happens during class time. Okay, so often in a flipped classroom environment, before students come to class, they maybe listen to podcasts or watch video vodcasts where the instructor introduces a concept and tells the student maybe what to do. And then by the time the student comes to class, he or she is somewhat prepared, has done the necessary research and the necessary activities, and can then use the class for discussion and getting on with coursework and that kind of a thing. So it's really just flipping what happens at school and at home. Okay, so it's been used quite a lot in the US in both primary, secondary and third level. Now the concept of flipped learning then uses the features of flipped classrooms, but actually according to flippedlearning.org, for it to be true flipped learning, you need to have these 4 pillars. And I have a link to the PDF here at the end of these slides. So you need to have flexible environment, there needs to be a proper learning culture, there needs to be intentional content, and you need a professional educator. And those pillars are discussed in more detail in the flipped learning article that I've cited. So essentially, just because you swap what you do in class with what students do in the evening does not automatically mean it's going to be more effective learning. So the flipped learning initiative is to actually make the flipped classroom, to maximize the impact of it by carefully considering these 4 pillars. Okay. I mentioned a while ago the concept of digital badges. So what is a digital badge? Essentially, it's just an online representation of a skill. So a digital badge might look as simple as an image of a trophy, or like a gold star like you get in school and so on. But there can be standards attached to that digital badge that enable you to transfer it into a collection of digital badges. So, for example, Mozilla have their backpack, their digital badge backpack, where it's basically an online collection or portfolio of the different, for example, MOOCs that you participated in and for which you received a digital badge. Okay, so essentially, because there are so many MOOC courses available at the moment, people are doing lots of courses, they're putting in the time and effort, but then when they're completing their CVs, they want to be able to showcase the extra continued professional development that they engaged in. and digital badges is one way of presenting evidence of that. And also it's a way that can motivate learners to complete a MOOC, okay? Even though you might think you wouldn't be motivated by an on-screen JPEG of a trophy, for example, having the digital badge that you could then showcase in a professional-looking online portfolio is more valuable than not having it. So there's been a lot of research into the advantages of the badging initiative and so on, which relates to the concept as well of the open badges, which is a technical standard. So when an organization offers an online course, if they use the open badges standard, it means that people will be able to transfer their badges into, let's say, into the Mozilla backpack and so on. So it's a good way of making, the award, making it transferable, and that you can then showcase to other people. Okay, so that's just a very brief introduction to MOOCs, flipped classrooms and digital badges. I just have the references there on the last slide that should help you get started with getting to grips with the main essential points of those.